Hello and good Monday morning, everybody. Let's get settled in and then we will get going. All right, let me just mess with a couple of my settings here. And okay. Awesome sauce. All right, I just did something a second ago and I tapped something and I don't know what's happening at the moment. So I'm trying to get this done. Okay, awesome. Hello, everybody, and welcome to MoonDay Morning Priestess Chat, where we talk about priestess stuff and water, of course. So, I had set intentions to start this morning a lot different than I did. And then I ended up running behind as usual. But I'm actually not too bad today. Like 2-3 minutes. I was here on time, but the reason I was running behind is because my tripod. My kiddo had helped me move some stuff around in here. And in like just typical, teenage male fashion, he compacted the tripod back up, which is great, right? Putting things away, what we're supposed to do. Except for the fact it took me a while to get it all up and angled correctly. So, what we're gonna do today. Okay, so for those of you that don't know, before I start, I have 2 different accounts on here. One is my name, Anwen Avalon, and I focus a lot on witchcraft, water magic, folk magic, Celtic things. This account is Water Priestess Arts, and it focuses on the sacred feminine, priestess arts, other priestesses, watery people that aren't priestesses, and such. So this one definitely takes a very feminine arts side of things. So, I actually got the idea to do this from a YouTube video that I used to do years ago, and MoonDay Mondays, right? MoonDay Monday chat. So I thought, hey, let's do Priestess chat. And the reason that I'm doing it is because there's a lot of different paths out there, a lot of different magical paths that focus on similar things, such as water, or Celtic goddesses or gods, or whatever, right? But as I've been doing my water priestess interviews, and like reaching out, finding other watery people, it really kind of occurred to me that there needed to be a place to really focus on the sacred feminine and water tending in various different ways. And that by bringing on other voices, I could help to reach people with information that I'm not an expert in, right? So I thought, hey, let's bring on guests. And so that's what I've been doing for the past 6 months, actually. First on Anwen Avalon, now over here, is bringing in other voices that may have other information than me, may be able to inspire someone else in their path, because the fact of the matter is I don't have all the information. I don't walk every single path, and but we have commonality, right, which is the sacred feminine and water. So with all of that being said, welcome to MoonDay Monday Priestess Chat. Now, we started in January, and we had Dakota Chanel, we had Brandy Williams, and today we are gonna have a special guest, Joey. Now, I love her work a lot, actually. She does a lot, and I really don't think that she gets enough attention for it. So to start out, we're gonna start over here with her. I am gonna bring her onto the Water Wednesday live stream later on this year so that we can talk about water and witchcraft in her practice. But today we're gonna be talking about priestess stuff. So yes, let's go from there. And then, oh, hello. Okay, hold on. I've got a couple comments and then we're gonna bring her on. Am I okay? Nordic Queen. Yes, I am. I don't have makeup on. And I did start my day a little bit later than I expected. I had a bit of a hard time falling asleep, so I ended up waking up later. But I don't have any makeup on. This is raw real right here. You can see, you know, no makeup. I got a little bit of red around my nose because I was blowing it this morning because allergies. But yeah, I'm a little bit tired this morning, but I'm okay. But if you're wondering why I'm not my like beautiful radiant self, it's probably the makeup. But I've been kind of committed to not doing that over here, because I don't know. I want there to be more, rawness, I think, over here. And really, at least for now, I might change my mind. Okay, I want to bring Joey on now though, and I don't want to keep talking. So okay, love the color in your room. Thank you. Cobalt and white I've been obsessed with. I'm actually getting ready to do my other room over here. Yes, I'm Wolf. I'm having a great day. A little bit of the sniffles. Yeah, just allergies. So, okay, let's bring her. All right, I was going to do a little bit better of an intro here, but, okay, so let me do this for just a moment. Starry-eyed little lady is her tag on Instagram here. And her name is Joey Morris. I cannot remember. We're going to get all the info about like Facebook and websites and all this kind of stuff. But Joey fascinates me. First off, I've been following her stuff for a while and I really love the aesthetic. I love the way that she crafts things. I love everything about it. And I love the fact that she's very similar to me where she is both witch and priestess, although we're going to ask her about that and make sure that that's true. And then she's also doing some priestess training, and she works with a lot of Celtic goddesses. So I have lots of questions, and we're going to get to learn all about her and the feminine arts side of her practice. So let me hit the button. Joey Morris, starry-eyed little lady. On. It's going to take just a second for both of us to pop on here. There we go.
Hello.
Hi, look at how cute and amazing you look today. Oh, and I was just talking about not having any makeup on, and look at you. You're like,
I was kind of thinking maybe I shouldn't have put any on now.
No, I love this. I am actually so happy about it because this is kind of what I'm talking about with this channel and diversity and having other paths and other voices, and really letting other women shine and highlighting it. So let's start with a quick intro and then I have so many questions. Okay, so the shoe's on the other foot this time.
Oh no.
Because the last time we did something like this, you were interviewing me and now it's my turn. So I get to ask the questions. But feel free, of course, to add whatever you like. I'm still over here fussing with my camera. I forget that when we do the double like this, it cuts my head off. Because I spent like a good 5 minutes trying to get it before I even went live, and now I'm just gonna be foreheadless. It's okay.
I'm kind of chinless. I'm like down here, so I'm like, oh.
Between the two of us, there'll be a whole head. Okay, so do you go by Joey in your community or by another name? Or does everyone call you Starry? Joey. Okay, Joey, all right. Yeah. Perfect. All right, so can you give us a little bit of background on you and your path. I see so much, and I probably have jumped to a lot of conclusions. So I want it to really come from you on, especially the priestess side. I told everybody we're going to bring you over for witchcraft soon too, but what is your path, and how did you find that?
See, I struggle a little bit with the names and the titles and the things, because I just kind of live it, and then putting titles to it afterwards is a little bit on the awkward side. I've kind of settled for Celtic hedge witch.
Ooh, I like it.
/ priestess, because it's both, and I do tend to gravitate towards the Celtic side of things, as we mentioned. I work primarily with the Morrigan. I'm training in Avalon under Ceridwen.
Oh.
But Celtic goddesses in general, all of them, yes.
Yeah.
And I love Celtic goddesses. Yeah.
So you're training. Well, okay, wait, hold on. Before we do anything, I keep forgetting to do this. Where can people find you? I'm going to, at the beginning and at the end, we're going to do it again. But where, besides here on Instagram under Starry-Eyed Little Lady, where can we find you? Website and Facebook, all that kind of stuff.
So starryeyedsupplies.com is the main store page, and you can probably find just about everything through links on there if you get lost. But anything with Starry-Eyed Supplies on it is me. So that's the Facebook page, and it's sometimes Starry-Eyed Little Lady, like Instagram is Starry-Eyed Little Lady, but like Patreon is Starry-Eyed Little Lady. The store is Starry-Eyed Supplies, and then the Facebook is Starry-Eyed Supplies. But if that's all really, really confusing, just go to the main page and you can find all the links on there. They're all on it.
Perfect. Okay. So swinging back around to Avalon. So you are training to be a priestess within the Goddess Temple of Glastonbury. Is that correct?
That's it.
Okay.
Yep.
So from over here, way over on this side of the pond, you know, many of us have known about this training, and I visited of course, Avalon Goddess Temple, the Glastonbury Goddess Temple. It's beautiful, but it's not something that many of us really are able to partake in because it's so far and there's so many in-person requirements. But I know myself and other women have always looked at that course and been like, wouldn't it be amazing to train in Glastonbury? So what is it like? What has the training been like? And anything that you'd love to share.
Well, you can do it online. They've actually shifted to a lot of it being online now because of COVID. So obviously I started and it was COVID. So apparently we had the weirdest introduction to this ever. I've passed my first year. I'm a sister of Ceridwen already. So I dedicated as a sister last September in Lake Bala. Now, Lake Bala is probably the most magical experience. It's obviously like the penultimate, the end point of your training on both years. And you go and you sit with your sisters around a fire and you're singing. And I had like created songs for that moment. I had channeled a couple for Ceridwen, and we sat in the dark and we were preparing to meet the embodiment who embodies Ceridwen, and it is an absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous thing to partake in, and that I think was the highlight for me because that felt like ancient ritual remembered, and that was, you know, worth all the COVID upset of our year. I'm quite well versed already. I mean, the lady who was in charge of it, B, said after the dedication she was worried she wasn't going to teach me anything. But I mean, you do learn to like call in the Avalonian tradition. That was new to me, and one of my major goals for going was because whilst I am well read and I've been walking this path for a very, very long time, I'm older than I look. I didn't really do it in person. I didn't really like, you know, do it with people face to face as much, unless it was like the odd
Yeah.
friend here and there. And that's what I wanted. And this year is more about rituals and ceremonies. Unfortunately, they've made it online entirely this year because of the ongoing issues with it, which is a bit of a bummer. But I've kind of said I still want to do my ritual in person, because I have actually been to one of the Dark Moon rituals in the actual goddess temple in Glastonbury itself, and I was part of one of the Dark Moon rituals there, and it was just like nothing on earth, like with the public coming in and you don't know anybody and you're like and it's terrifying, but at the same time it's like liberating, and it's like it's nice in a, I mean nice is the wrong word, but it's living priestesshood in the
Yeah.
world, and that's the important thing.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. So many things I wanted to dive deeper in. One of them is ancient ritual remembered.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that is the heart almost of the priestess path, because at least within the maybe the Celtic realms or the pagan realms, maybe not so much in the New Age realms. I don't know honestly, but ancient ritual remembered. That is really what like Water Priestess was about. Was taking these things that I knew and trying to match them with anything within history, really, or archaeology, and being like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this is ancient ritual remembered. Now I just need to pinpoint it into something else. But the heart of the priestess path is ancient ritual remembered. Almost decolonization is a really big thing that we talk about. I don't know over in England if it's as much as over here, because obviously different histories. But for me, the priestess path and going back into the ancient Celtic rituals, whether that's through remembrance and channeling or digging through, archaeological data, or a little bit of both, is really this process of uncolonizing, taking us back to before all of these things were really ripped away from us, and put in a framework that says, hey, this is what my personal indigenous mothers of my, lineage, however you want to frame that, were doing, or something similar. And this idea, not necessarily reconstruction, although I feel like reconstruction could be part of it. Like, side note with Celtic reconstruction, I actually, when I first started this path, really was interested in it because I wanted to go back and do things exactly the way they were in the old times. But that's just not it's just not viable. It's
No.
not something that we can do. But instead of reconstruction, if it's remembered, and I think that that's why remembered is such a, like, is popping out to me so much, because it almost brings that reconstruction in, but in a way that is less rigid and more heart-centered. So yes, ancient ritual remembered. And the other thing that you were talking about too, with being in person in ritual, there's not, you can't compare it. Even when we sit here and you could give me the best description of that ritual with every adjective that you could ever think of, and it still wouldn't feel anything close to what you felt in that ritual, and that the power of being in that sacred feminine powerful space is quite immense. So that brings me then to kind of the last part with what you had mentioned, with already having practiced for many, 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 many years. And then you decided to go into training, even though you probably had surpassed that level. And I think that I resonate with that so much because I had also been practicing for years and years and years. Well, I shouldn't say years and years and years. I'll say years and years. Not 3 years and years, but 2 years and years. And I wanted formal training. I wanted to, even though I had read and practiced and even led rituals at that point, you know, I still wanted to have an experienced, seasoned person teach me and guide me. And there were times when I was like, oh, I know all this stuff. And they would look at my work and be like, yeah, you do. And then there'd be other times where I was like, yeah, I don't know this because I haven't worked in circle with other people. I don't know what it's like to hold space or energy for 20 people. And I don't know these invocations. I don't know these spirits. And so even though I had so much experience, there's so much that I learned. And I just think there's something so powerful about having such a strong self of identity and confidence that you can follow your heart and start at ground zero, even if ground zero is 10 steps behind you. And the wisdom there, I think, can just be shared with so many people because, my goodness, like, being able to be humble enough and not having that ego that's like, I'm better than this, I'll start my own thing, versus this idea of like, no, hey, I want to put my ego on the back shelf and I want my heart to experience this process, is really beautiful. And you're correct with what you said just a few minutes ago, which is there's always something to learn. And I think that there's such wisdom and power in that humble understanding of, even when we're advanced, we can still sit in the beginner phase and learn. And that is powerful too. Your wisdom this morning is fantastic. So anyways, I don't want to hijack, which I did a little bit, but okay, a lot.
Well, I just want to say though that the good thing about going back to the beginning is quite often you spiral down. So you go back to the beginning concepts and you suddenly spiral down and you have a different understanding of this thing you didn't necessarily consider, because you're taking all the information that you've already got and then taking a beginner concept to a new level. So you almost spiral down with some of the beginner stuff. It's always worth revisiting.
The spiral. I talk about the sacred spiral as well, and I like it instead of a wheel. Because, like the wheel of the earth, I like it to be the sacred spiral, and we turn again in the sacred spiral because each turn of the spiral we pass by the same points, and but we view them from a different perspective, and there's, like you said, always something to learn. And I like that. I like the spiraling down, but then that you can spiral up with it too. It's constant flux. But this is one of the reasons why I love water so much. So you had talked about working with the Morrigan. So for those that don't know, who is the Morrigan?
Oh.
I mean, I know, but for people that are listening,
the Morrigan is complex. So if you Google her, you'll probably get ancient war goddess of the Celtic people. But I mean, I don't think she's a war goddess. I think she's a goddess of war, and there's a difference. So I think she is a shapeshifter. She is, well, she is in the mythology even, but she sort of, that feeds into everything. She alchemizes everything. She has a lot of interplay with the sovereignty of the land and the shaping of the land. So she will provoke war to change the political landscape. That's what war is for her. Or she will provoke cattle raiding in the mythology, for example, to change the landscape and change who's in charge, because the sovereignty is tied directly to who is in charge. They have this marrying of the land ceremony, and therefore the well-being of the ruler, body, mind and soul, is tied directly to the well-being of the land. So if you're not doing your job, she comes in. And So she has elements of the phantom, of life, of death, of warfare, of prophecy, of magic, and shapeshifting. To me, at least, is the heart of it all. That's who she is. Um, that's who she is in a nutshell. Like, she's massively expansive. So
it's really hard to frame her, to put her in a box, because as soon as you think, aha, I figured it out,
she's out.
This is who she is. She's like, let me break that box for you. Yeah. Let me show you that's not it. Okay, but sovereignty and connecting with the land. Can we talk a little bit more about that? So for people that maybe have heard sovereignty, it's a big buzzword, at least it was in the pagan community maybe for the past 10 years. And there's lots of different ways to think about it. I've even heard it within like some strange communities that like not evangelical communities, but kind of more those fundamental things where like the sovereignty of removing government control from their path or something like that. I came across something recently. It's hard for me to even nail down, but it was because of the sovereignty. And I was like, oh, okay, sovereignty, I know this. And then they just went on this whole other, tangent about like political things. But so it's used in a lot of different places, but within the Celtic and pagan landscape, I guess. What is that? What does that mean?
I think sovereignty is one of those juicy words, because you ask 10 people, you're going to get 10 different answers. I think on the very basic, you can tie it to the idea of rulership, but within the pagan, at least within my pagan path, the only person you can truly rule over or have real power over is yourself. So to me, sovereignty is about the way that we empower ourselves and the way that we conduct ourselves in the world. But a lot of kingship, rulership in the Celtic mythology is actually to be of service to the people and to the land. So people who are using sovereignty in this very, very like overlord kind of fashion, that doesn't vibe with me. It doesn't ring true for me. So sovereignty is, for me at least, it's very much about the empowerment of self, like being true to who you are, but not seeking domination over others when you're doing it. Sovereignty is I use the word balance about 20 times a day. It's my favorite word, but it is like the balance between a sovereignty of self, but also being connected to everyone else throughout the spiritual ecosystem. So you are and have every right to be in your sovereign self, in your body, in your mind, in your spirit, and hold things that are true and authentic to who you are, and not allow yourself to be railroaded by outside forces, whatever they might be. You have the right to boundaries, you have the right to your voice, but so does everybody else. So you have to find that balance and respect and understanding within sovereignty, because the problem of sovereignty is a lot of people use it like I'm sovereign and therefore I get to do what I want and F everybody else, right? And it doesn't fit for me within that at all.
If your freedom of self somehow restricts or controls someone else's freedom of self, then boundaries, setting boundaries. And I think that there's for the other side of that is also not getting, I think you touched on this, where establishing yourself truly, but also not so establishing yourself as who you are truly without this what's the word that I'm looking for? Focus on, well, I'm gonna run the narrative for this. There's a difference between who we are, right, and how we feel and identify, and not shrinking parts of ourselves, but then also not allowing people to control your narrative or say, oh, this is the direction we're going to go, and you don't yeah, you don't really have a choice in the matter. And that we see this in things with the LGBTQA community, where there's a lot of sects that are like, oh, that's evil. No, we don't want it. And so they think their sovereignty is to stamp it out. Whereas the other side is like, hey, we just want to exist and be acknowledged. And so this balance, like you said, of the two, being sovereign without forcing the narrative on someone else. And we have to be careful how we do that. It's a very fine balance. It's a seesaw.
It's a learning process. It's definitely a
Yeah.
learning
And we
process.
all
I
make
think,
mistakes.
yeah, we're all going to mess that up. Nobody's perfect. And
Well, and
um,
even when we're in like okay, even when we're minding our own business and doing what we think is best for us and just quietly sitting in the corner, our actions can impact other people without knowing it. And I used to fall into this a lot, and it was the people pleasing mentality, which is what my brain is trying to formulate to talk about, where this people pleasing, like, oh, I won't do that because it might make them uncomfortable. If I show up in my fullness with what I've created, it might hurt someone's feelings, and I don't want to do that. And that finding, like you said, the balance between being too timid and not showing up and not standing our ground, and being too forceful, and the balance between the two, which is really a lovely way of
I
talking.
have the opposite problem. I shadow poke by accident, like without even meaning to. I've just termed it being like a shadow priestess under the Morrigan, because sometimes it feels like even like she sends me out there, like my role is to poke somebody's shadow without malice, without even knowing I'm doing it sometimes. And I'm just like, what? And then I'll sit with it and be like, right, okay, is this something I need to work on or is this literally I went and said, I love this, and they took it completely the wrong way, and I'm like, no, that's yours. So yeah, I'm kind of the opposite with that.
Yeah, I've had experienced that before, where you're like, what?
Yeah.
Like, crap. Like that was not the map I was on, but somehow this is where we are.
Yep.
It's very frustrating. I've looked at it as being the catalyst of change, almost as if in those times I am an initiator, but I don't like it.
No,
Because
it's one
it
of my
makes
least favorite bits under the Morrigan, I have to say, and she keeps doing it to me, and I'm like, can we not?
yeah. So Sulis is my goddess, as you know. We'll probably swing around and talk to her, because you also, I know, work with her a little bit and have written some written a whole bunch on her. But she, unlike Bridget, has that kind of justice to her. And sometimes that is with a like really hot fiery flame that incinerates. And I'm like, but I was gonna bring it healing water. And she's like, oh yeah, that's great. I just incinerated it. That water's nothing. And it's very frustrating, because sometimes I sit there and I'm like, if I hadn't chosen this response, I would be doing a detriment to myself. But now this particular response has somehow stirred the muck up in someone else's cauldron. And it's not what I intended. It's strange. I mean, have you ever posted something about being really frustrated about something or a situation, and you post about it, say on Instagram or Facebook, and then like 6 people out of the blue are like, just come up to you and confront you about different things, and you're like, that post wasn't about you.
Yeah. I
Like,
mean, I have all sorts of strange experiences in the spiritual community. some of the worst is actually from men, to be honest. Like, I'm sorry guys, I love men, but like the reactions I get sometimes from guys, because sometimes I'm talking about empowerment for women, right? We need empowerment for women.
Yeah.
We need this. It's not something we're talking about because we feel like it. It's something that we still, as women worldwide, desperately need. And oh gosh, some of the rants you would not believe. Like, okay, like, sure.
This wasn't for you. This was
Then
for
yeah, keep
women.
going. That's fine.
Sorry it threatened you. Yeah, it's a strange phenomenon, and I've definitely experienced it, which is, I think, maybe why I end up now in more of the struggle of not wanting to hurt people's feelings, because I've seen the pattern of standing in my sovereignty and how that can perhaps negatively impact other people. And I've had to sit with that too and be like, but is a negative impact inherently bad?
It's
No.
not, but the other thing that I should probably, like, that comes to mind when you say that though, is the negative reactions tend to be louder. You don't know how many positive reactions you're having standing in your sovereignty sometimes, because the
Yes.
negative responses are usually the loudest, like when people are hurting or that you've poked a shadow in them or something. Those responses tend to be the ones that lash out, right? That's what I call wearing the shadow mask in my writing. So when people like wear their shadow and then they yell out from behind it and pretending that it's indignation perhaps, or anger, and what's actually going on is pain, right? But if you
Yeah.
standing in your sovereignty is affecting twice as many people in a way that is needed and profound and beautiful, and half the time you don't even realize it, until maybe much later. That's happened to me a few times. I'm really lucky in that sometimes people do reach out and say, I know you're having a really hard time with this reaction at the minute. It's like a nasty reaction from, I had this only the other day when I was talking about death rituals, and I was a little bit upset because I had sort of said, with regards to priestessing, that we have to consider the dying in their moment of death, and it's not the best thing to do to be screaming don't go at a dying loved one, because that can make their death very painful. And I wasn't trying to tell anybody about how they should grieve after the fact. I wasn't trying to tell anybody how they should feel. I wasn't trying to sort of shame anybody who had reacted that way, but I was trying to draw attention to the fact that the entire conversation was not about the person whose death it was, and that death was theirs. It was their ritual, their moment, and so to ease their pain was, but the reactions I got were you know, and I felt awful. I like the reactions I got. I was like, okay. And I walked off social media. I posted about it. I let it out of myself because I was so angry, and I was like, I just need to let it out and talk about it because I still think it's important. But I actually got some really beautiful emails and messages and things saying, I just need you to know, even if it's in private, that this was really important, that somebody said it, and thank you for saying it. So sometimes we don't know the positive, and we just, sometimes we have to trust it, because we don't know who we're going to impact. We don't know who we're going to help in that way.
In the world of 5-star reviews, most people who post reviews are the people that are really angry, people that are having some sort of reaction to it, whether that's disappointment or something else. So that it makes a lot of sense that the more negative responses do tend to be louder, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing, because what if that is stirring the muck from the bottom of the cauldron, so to speak, so that it can be properly cleaned or taken a look at? Instead of saying, yes, this is a cauldron full of clear water, we can look at it and say, yes, this is a cauldron full of mud. How do we get that mud out? So there's something powerful about the transformational energies that the dark goddess, the dark priestess is. And dark and baneful and dark and negative are not necessarily synonymous, because darkness, we have dark, we have nighttime, we have the bottom of
Mm-hmm.
the ocean, we have the earth itself.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things are dark, but
Mm-hmm.
none of them are necessarily bad. Seeds, they grow and germinate in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
We sleep in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a ton of positive things to darkness. And I know
Mm-hmm.
that you know this, but
Oh,
I'm
I
just
love
kind of
this. Yeah.
right reiterating it. And I've even seen Bane, like actual baneful activity in the name of light and love. And so I'm
Oh,
very,
yeah.
oh yeah, I'm very, very careful to say there's baneful and positive. There's, you know, positive and negative don't necessarily mean good and baneful, or
Mm-hmm.
baneful and good, or um, there's healing. Honestly,
Yeah.
healing is done in the dark. And um, you would, and sometimes bane, sometimes something might be perceived as bane or bad. For example, you break a leg, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You've broken your leg, there's no hospitals, there's no medical attention. And so over a really long period of time, you figure out how to heal it and you walk with a limp. Great, you've healed the actual wound in the leg. Now, let's say a doctor or a healer comes along and says, "Oh, I see you have that limp. I can fix that for you." It's going to require a great amount of pain, but I can put it back
Mm-hmm.
exactly this, like, so that you won't have that limp and you can actually heal. And where do you sit with that? Do you take the limp and what you already have because you're functioning, or do you allow the goddess or the doctor or the priestess or whatever, right, to break that bone in a
Mm-hmm.
moment of pure pain?
Oh, this is
And
shadow
someone,
work.
right? And someone might think that that's painful. Look what you've just done to that
Mm-hmm.
leg. You've now rebroken it, where it's like, no, no, no. I rebroke it so that we could set it proper and so that it could actually heal without the limp. And so the dark goddess and the dark priestess, or the left hand of the priestess, is this,
Mm-hmm.
or the goddess, the dark goddess, is this, the one that goes in and says, "Yes, I see how much work you did to heal that, and you have done so good. Let me take this one step further. Are you ready to be broken?"
Mm-hmm.
But that also can sum up just the priestess, the becoming part of the priestess practice itself is being, having the dark goddess literally take you, smash you on the rocks, and say, "Hey, seagulls, come and eat out our guts for a good 6 months. And when we're done,
Yeah.
we'll build the most amazing priestess back." I suspect you've had experiences like this too.
With the Morrigan, yeah, just a bit.
You don't
So
work with the dark goddess and not.
the way that I phrase it, for me is a lot of the time what we're doing when we're walking a spiritual path or a priestess path, we're actually undoing. We're like stripping away the layers of conditioning that have been like formed on us like a skin, like a crud all over us, and we're ripping it off, right? And that hurts when we rip this conditioning off. And it's often through shadow work. So shadow work it's sort of an amalgamation term between psychology and spirituality at this point, where it's looking at all of the parts of yourself that you have ignored or shamed or you don't like about yourself or you're embarrassed about, or you have, you know, guilt and anger and all these emotions which get labeled as the negative emotions, and they're not. We're all here to experience all emotions. That's the point. All
Exactly.
emotions are just as valid, but we have managed to demonize some of them, and
Yeah.
that does us harm, to be honest with you. If we can't sit in every single emotion and learn to understand ourselves through it, then we're missing something along the journey of memory, which is the reason for being in my head anyway. The whole point and purpose of life is memory and feeding memory back to the soul and the ecosystem. That's where I'm at with my priestessing. So when it comes to the break, it's actually like often, it's not always, but it's often like I have formulated this entire self-defense mechanism around this, or I have created like a place to hide, or a personality trait even around this traumatic moment, so I never have to feel it again. And Morrigan, or the Dark Goddess, is just like, nope. Like, rip it off, get raw with it, sit with it, cry, scream, howl, do whatever you need to, but we're going. And that's the Morrigan in a nutshell, to be honest. Oh, you don't want to go over here, you like, you can come willingly, or you can come dragged by your hair, but we're going that way. And I don't like change. I'm terrible with change most of the time. I get anxious, I don't like it at all. I get in my comfort zones, and I'm like, great. And then she's like, no, doink. So you go in one way or another, usually with priestess training. And it can be hard. It can be really, really rough. I've had times where I've been at that altar. You can't see the Morrigan's altar at the minute because I don't tend to share it. We've got Ceridwen's back here. Morrigan's is over there. And I've screamed at her. I'm like, why have I not suffered? And like, I have screamed at her, like, flat out, and she'll take it, because that's what she's there to do. She will be like, right, you done? Now stand up.
Mm-hmm.
And we stand up.
Yep. Oh man. And I have been looking at the eyes of the priestess catalyst, the dark priestess, the when the dark goddess works through the priestess in that way. So it's almost like, man, that lady is so mean to me, right? Like, I've gone back and I've looked at those experiences. Actually, starting this whole live stream has really helped me with that, because talking about like the aging priestess a couple weeks ago and stuff like that, and I keep thinking back to some of these older women, these crone archetype women, who in my life I have these negative markers. One of them telling me I wasn't good enough to write. She'd write me a letter of recommendation for anything but actual writing. And then within 24 to 36 months from that, flipping that narrative and writing, and eventually then getting my contract for my first book. And I have such a negative experience of this woman, but if it wasn't for that moment, that catalyst of like, no, we're not going to give you, all the sparkly accolades. We're going to tell you the harsh truth at the moment, was huge. It woke me up and brought me to places that I never even expected. Same thing happened to me once with art, intellectual property dispute. I named my business like the same as someone else's, but different, like art style. Like, anyways, it was a whole thing. And I had to change. And I remember feeling like, how, like, this person's so mean, all these things that they've done to me, blah, 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 blah. But it then pushed me again into another avenue that I didn't think was possible. So even when we look back at some of these things in our lives that we have negative associations with them, when we look at them from a different perspective in the sacred spiral, further away, different perspective, we can see, oh, this was the dark goddess working through this woman to really help shape me when I was like, I know best, I know the shape that I should be in, and it's this. And really, the dark goddess, in my case, would have been Sulis in her dark aspect, would come in and be like, oh, hello, let me whoop your ass in the right direction. So I love that about your priestess philosophy and practice and take, that there is this aspect that needs to be acknowledged, and that it's a powerful catalyst of change and shape-shifting, which brings me to Ceridwen. Now, first question I have about you and Ceridwen is Ceridwen part of like the where you are at in your Glastonbury Goddess Temple training, or did Ceridwen choose? How did you start working with Ceridwen through this? Did she choose you? And what is it like working with her? I also have tons of things to say, but I want to hear what you have to say, so I'll try and.
Okay, so I think the first thing to mention before we get into Ceridwen directly is that as a part of my priestessing, or in part of what Morrigan allows me to do, I channel really easily. I connect to most deity really, really easily. That's why I create songs, invocations, poetry for other gods and goddesses, especially when people ask me for help. So if a person comes to me and says, can you create through the store, can you create a invocation to Aphrodite, then yes, I can do that, because I have that ability in me naturally. I can't tell you why that is there, but it always has been.
Well,
And it's
within
like,
Celtic practices, the bard is
yeah,
magical.
yeah,
Poetry is considered to be magical, a connection with
yeah,
the divine spirit, the Awen,
yeah.
that divine inspiration. And it sounds to me like that's just where one of your natural magical talents lie. And I've
Mm-hmm.
read your stuff, and it's beautiful. And honestly, you should put together a just absolutely beautiful incantation poetry book that is like a
Oh, there's
coffee
5
table
of them.
beauty.
There's 5 of them.
Yeah.
The songs of shades exist. Yeah, there's 5 songs of shades that exist through Story Eyed Supplies in
All
digital
right.
form and on paper. So they
There we
exist.
go. Okay.
And because of this, there is no Morrigan training. Currently, there is no Morrigan training currently in
I know what
Avalon.
that means.
And the Morrigan was like, right. And Ceridwen I love anyway. So Ceridwen is like a sister energy to the Morrigan. Ceridwen is more Welsh, whereas Morrigan is more Irish. Technically, I think she's primordial. I think she's more ancient, but the mythology that we have. Now, I have split history in my genealogy. So I have Welsh in my genealogy. I have a lot of Irish in my genealogy. And I have quite a lot of Scandinavian in my genealogy. But because of the Welsh heritage, I didn't have a connection to my Welsh heritage. I don't have anything to do with my Welsh family at all. And so the Ceridwen training was a decision because I wanted to go to Avalon. I've been wanting to go to Avalon in the flesh for a very long time. I've been astrally journeying to Avalon to heal, especially. Healing was my main reason for going to Avalon, and I created physical things around healing waters of Avalon to begin with, and then sort of branched out from there. And I've been doing it astrally for 9 years before I went there physically. And I wanted to be a part of this priestesshood so badly, so badly. I wanted to partake in this training and see what that held to me. And so Morrigan gave her permission, and I looked at the different trainings, and the Ceridwen one made the most sense. It was a mixture of death and herbs. It was like death priestessing and herbalism, and I was like, I'm on board. There we go. That's like 2 parts of things that I adore. Plant spirits, communing with plant spirits, and all the medicine of plants, and then like the death priestessing. I was like, yes, I'm on board. And I've, Ceridwen to work with. She's more earth mothery than Morrigan is. So
Yeah.
Ceridwen is a goddess who's like Morrigan will be like, no, just go fucking sort it out yourself, excuse my language, but she'll just be like, just go sort it out, just go raid something. And you can't raid things, it's not how it's done. And Ceridwen's like, no, we're going to manifest this. She's like, get out, we're going to manifest it, we're going to get the cauldron on, we're going to shove some herbs in, we're going to create some magic, we're going to sort it. She's much more earthy. She considers like the earthy realm, because she's a queen in her own right as well, Ceridwen, and she rules over her own kingdom in the astral at Vala. So she understands those very earthly concerns as well. So she has a lot more of that vibe into her. You can see behind me at the minute, we're in her Sunarai phase, which is her healer phase, which is lovely for this. And so you can see that she's got just about that. I've put herbs on her statue here, and yeah, you can see that. So she has that kind of very much down to earth. Like
Yeah.
I'd say she's more earth sign, whereas Morrigan's more scorpionic in her vibes, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. And she's still naughty. She's still got her I've never seen her in crone form, right? I don't see Ceridwen like that. A lot of people paint this image of this old crone hag type Ceridwen. I have never seen her like that personally. I see her as very like middle-aged woman, very
Mm-hmm.
sovereign, very royal, very regal, very you do not mess with her because she's still a dark goddess. But she definitely has that I take care of my kingdom, I take care of my people vibe to her. And she's, you know, all about the magic, and very earth-based magic though. Whereas Morrigan's, for me at least, has been much more about like sound and throat and like bringing forth soul song. And Morrigan is much more in that sort of, not always, but in that vibe generally. Whereas Ceridwen's magic tends to be more of the earth. Like grounding down in and using plants and using things of that nature.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I've read Ceridwen's story a lot, but I'm actually just been writing it up and studying it again. But nowhere does it really talk about her as a crone goddess.
No.
It's a mother goddess. And I never got that because she becomes pregnant. And
Yep.
crones don't do that.
No.
So I've always, yes, because I started reading her story very confused, and still to this day, why people are like, oh, she's a crone goddess, and I'm like, but mother, she's a mother goddess. The whole point of her story is to
that's the witch archetype though, isn't she? She's the witch, and then
yeah,
Christianity and the general sort of
that's
that happens with
yes,
witches and women in their power wants to make women undesirable. And what's undesirable to Christians? Old women who can't breed anymore. So they
yes.
do this
Oh
thing
my
where
God.
they like try and take all the power. I mean, crones are powerful AF anyway. That's all nonsense.
Oh
But
yeah.
they, if they're trying to take away and make the witch haggard, me, the witch can't be beautiful. The witch can't be in her power,
Right.
in her kingdom, in her sovereignty. No,
The
absolutely not.
colonization of women in general. I mean, yeah, exactly. The control of, yes, making that makes so much sense. Because, yeah, I definitely read it. I was like, where are these people? Where are everybody getting this info? But that makes so much sense to me. And I can't believe that I didn't put it together. But this is why we have talks like this. It's because we learn so much. But Ceridwen and Morrigan both have something that I feel is undesirable to a lot of mainstream folks, and that is the sacred anger and rage, the sacred no. And it's still so demonized in our culture. If you say, no, you may not take this part of me or my intellectual property or tell me what to, like all these things, right? Then if we are met with something hostile and then we're hostile back, all of a sudden we're evil and bad. And I'm like, wait a second, there is sacredness in being angry because it's an emotion that we experience for a reason, and that reason is so the lights go off and say, hey, injustice, you're mad because things are not right, things in your sovereignty are not right. And so I feel like with Ceridwen, I've experienced her story from many different aspects. And the first time I read it, I was reading it from Ceridwen's perspective. And then the second time I was reading it from little Gwion Bach's perspective. And it's like, if you're Gwion Bach, that is a mean ass lady that's harassing you.
Can I insert here? Because I
Yes,
had a
please.
massive moment with Gwion, right? Gwion's name has roots in poison. The same poison like that split the cauldron. He was also, according to some researchers, his name is also associated with him being otherworldly and fey. It's possible he incarnated into that role for the very purpose of being alchemized into Taliesin. And it really, it's like, this was one of my big moments in my first year for me personally, that I did a lot of work privately as well as in the group. That was one of my big private moments. And I like went back into the group like, guys, it's about souls. And everyone was like, what? And I was like, they're what souls? They're twin souls. They're both halves of a whole, guys. They become one. Because and then her other son, Mofran, is known as the Dark One, and
Right.
Taliesin is the Shining Brow. It's like the twins from the Celtic tradition, the twin kings from like that saved in like the Holly King and the
Yeah.
Oak King.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, I'm now going to go harass all of my Welsh speakers.
Yeah.
Being like, knock, knock, native Welsh speaker, help. Yeah, okay, I am gonna. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
I had
so
that moment when I was like, oh, because I found it somewhere. I can't remember what I was doing or randomly researching, but I just found like the origins of his name suggest that it's not some poor boy that she was just mean to, that it was predestined to happen, that he had chosen to come in, like he was sickly in himself because the body, his physical body, could not hold the spirit underneath, which was otherworldly. And through the rebirthing process through Ceridwen, he became the greatest bard of all time. He became the embodiment of magic.
wow. Okay, like you just like tore things open, and now I'm like, and we're gonna go study the Ceridwen story again. Like I just finished it like 3 weeks ago, but now I'm like, okay, again, because a few months before that, I was mad because I was reading it from Gwynon's perspective, and I was like if I'm reading it from here, like this time I'm reading the story, I'm mad at her because she's just being mean. But
Mm.
then I've also read it where I've been like, what is this little fuck doing? You know, right? Like so
Well,
from
the
Ceridwen's
other
story.
thing, that I think is so important. Firstly, it's a mystery tradition, so there
Yes.
are things happening in that story that, like, if you read the story and take it at face level, you're missing the point of the whole story.
Yeah.
But the thing that I think is really important to me is that she pursues him to force him to shapeshift through each of the Celtic realms, through land and sky and sea, and he has to pass through all of the realms of existence before he gets taken down into Ceridwen, into her womb space, into the cauldron of creation and his rebirth. So she forces him on this transition through all of the realms of existence and then unmakes him and remakes him, and the souls are joined through Ceridwen. So that was another one of those moments that I've always I felt that a little bit with the shape shifting, but then it started to make even more sense with the rebirth element at the end.
Yeah. I wow. Okay. Well, we're gonna start Ceridwen again this week because I think I'm gonna get a different version. I have the one by last name Davies, I think. And I have Lady Charlotte Guest too, but that one's not a great version. I think there's like a really expensive version of the Mabinogi that I think I'm just gonna drop the money on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to read another translation. Because yes, there is so much. I had seen and definitely had understood the transforming through the different realms, right? The bird, the
Mm-hmm.
fish, all of that. But I never thought of Taliesin and Guyonbach and Morfun and how the three in there. Now, here's another, I'm slightly changing the subject because
Mm-hmm.
I also have thought about Ceridwen as a water goddess. And the reason being two
Oh.
parts. One is the cauldron, but
Mm-hmm.
two, her home is, at least my translations say, in Lake Bala.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
on, but in, which
There's
means
also
that,
the river. Do you know about the river that flows? I've forgotten its name because I completely have. There's a river that joins up to Lake Bala, and it's the River of the Dead. And it flows through all of these, like, it's supposed to flow through all of these graveyards and places of ancestral death. So the spirits are almost supposed to move down through the river and end in Lake Bala. in the cauldron of Lake Bala. And I wrote about it in my Ceridwen Celtic calling course for autumn equinox, because it was almost as if she was the sort of last point before Samhain, because that moving of the dead spirits through the waters. And I was like, oh, when I found that out, because she definitely has that watery like element to her.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and she lives in the lake. I mean, it makes her a lake lady of sorts. And if you
Mm-hmm.
look at all of the lake ladies, there's always some sort of transformation, catalyst for change. Even in like stories like The Witch of Loch Island, where the story's told from the perspective of humans, and the fairy woman slash goddess is now an evil hag witch. The visitation, the working or interacting with the spirit is a catalyst of change somehow. Okay, so what is the herb that you personally would associate with Ceridwen the most?
See, because I know the different, we use a wheel of Ceridwen in Ceridwen training, right? So you have different archetypes. You have Creatrix Mother, you have Tsunurai Healer, you have the Initiatrix, the Dark aspect. So there's 8 of them. And I sort of swing between 2 when it comes to like major herbs with her. So when she's in her mother aspect, I go with like a grain, like a wheat. Like it's not quite the same as Teochew, who really is in that element, but like that kind of thing. But to be honest, probably apple. I mean, it's not technically a herb. Like apple for her is one of the massive ones, or mugwort. Between those 3. So yeah,
The mugwort I can see, but the apple, I mean, I can see that as well, but with the colors land, sea, sky, and so that makes sense. But I like the grain too. I really like the grain because that is the seeds
it's in
and
story with the eating of Taliesin as grain. So I can't remove grain.
right,
But that really is in her mother aspect. Like it, if you say Ceridwen in her like sorceress, like witch, like it doesn't quite fit. Like mugwort is better
right.
there. Whereas in her mother aspect, absolutely 100% grain. Like, but because she's a shapeshifter again, same as Morrigan, it's very, very difficult for me to go, this is the one herb, or this is the one thing, or this is the one crystal, or
Right.
this is the one,
I know.
because she
So hard.
shifts.
Yeah.
So I'll give you 3.
I know. It's really hard to narrow it down to just one thing, especially when doing correspondences, because it's like, okay, well, what animal would you associate most with Ceridwen? Okay, like, come on, there's multiples. It's hard to nail it down. Okay, so we have a comment here. Is it the River Dee? Is that the one that you're talking about?
I would have to look it up. I have some trouble with my memory, unfortunately, because
Yeah,
I just
same.
do. I would
Names
have
and
to
numbers.
go and look it up. It's because it's literally on my computer in the Ceridwen course is the place for me to go
Yeah.
look at it. So I'm not certain. It might easily be. If that's one of the major rivers that runs into Lake Bala, it's quite possible. But I can't give you a definite answer without going and checking, and I can't really do that easily at the minute. So
Yeah, no worries. I'm the same way. I do really good, like very like strict research so that when my notes, I don't have to worry about my notes because I do. I'm like, wait, was it 1938 or was it 1983? Because my
yeah.
dyslexia gets bad. So, okay, well, I've had you on for over an hour. And so for everybody here, we are going to have Joey on the main account, Water Witchcraft. We don't have the date yet, but we are going to be bringing her on again for water and witchcraft in her practice. So we'll talk about a lot more witchy things. And I think right now I'm booking April and May. We'll message, we'll figure it out. But
Yeah.
there'll be a part 2 on the main account focusing on witchcraft. What do you have coming up in the next couple of weeks? Do you have any courses or events or anything like that that people listening might be able to join?
Well, obviously there's the store side of things. So there's like physical things. There's the Boudica anthology just hit the store if you're interested in female empowerment. there. Patreon is the place. Patreon is my favorite place to be, and if you want to interact with me, work with me, do all sorts of courses and things, if you're on a certain tier on Patreon, you just get everything. You get anything book related, you get it on there. You get the courses, and the Celtic Calling course that I mentioned, as of probably spring equinox, I'm going to be releasing it as like a year-long course, and I'm going to be adding to it before then. So if you don't know, the Celtic Calling course is the Wheel of the Goddess, and we sort of took lesser known Celtic goddesses and the Morrigan and Ceridwen for each of the sabbats. And so, for example, spring equinox was Andraste, the ancient British goddess of Boudica. So we're going to be re-releasing that around spring equinox, fingers crossed, as long as everything goes to plan. If not, forget I said anything, and I will work for the next sabbat and start there. But we are doing the second year of that on Patreon, and the second year is the archetypes. So we're looking at Bridget as the alchemist this month. That's beginning.
Oh, I love it.
And so we will be working through the goddesses again, but it's very much in the archetype and what that means in the Celtic mythology, in the Celtic tradition, what it means to us today, a little bit of shadow work, all that good stuff. So Patreon's probably my favorite place to be, unless you're looking for physical goodies.
Okay, the physical goodies, check out her website, and for everything else, check out Patreon. We did a giveaway over this summer with her Sula's course, and I don't remember how many pages it was, but I remember
80.
like being like 18. I was gonna say, like, I know it's more than 10, because I remember being like, holy crap, there's so much in here. Like, she writes so much, and like,
I'm a Virgo, I can't help it.
Like, packed full of information. So my goodness, yeah, they're so full. Everything is worth it. That package was amazing. And so we're talking about 8 of those for different goddesses, and diving deeper with Ceridwen and the Morrigan and everything else. So do we have an idea when a Morrigan training might take place, or is this still just in toddler stages?
We're in toddler stages. I've talked to the priestess up from me about what that would entail. Obviously, I wanted to finish my priestess training before getting to that point. They are doing a lot of them online now, like some of them entirely online for the time being anyway, so it might just be that. I'm creating it quietly in the background, so it's ready to go. I have the 8 points of who, well, 9 technically, with Morrigan at the center, the 9 aspects of Morrigan already. I know who they would be, what the archetypes, etc. So it's baby steps at the minute, but yes, that is the long-term plan, which is probably why the Morrigan permitted in the first place. Yes, you may follow this goddess for 2 years, and then
that's how she works. Oh my gosh, yeah, the Morrigan is quite dynamic and layered and powerful, and while she's not a goddess that I work with, I have definitely felt her presence, and she's quite strong. And yes, it's gonna happen, because if she wants it to happen, it'll happen. I've definitely seen that. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for being on here and chatting and letting me ramble and sharing all of your knowledge about the Morrigan and Ceridwen, and your path and your training and everything that you've been doing. Is there anything before we say goodbye that you would like to share with anybody out there, and if not, then just give us one more time where we can find you on Patreon and all that good stuff.
Well, firstly, thank you very much for having me. It's always really lovely to chat to you, and for such a lovely conversation. It was gorgeous. And just for anybody who is maybe going through a rough patch right now, I know it's been hard for a long time for so many of us. Just keep going. There's light at the end of this tunnel. Things are starting to shift. It's gonna get better. It will be okay. And if you're like at the beginning of a dark goddess path and it's rough and you're at one of those screaming at the altar moments, I've been there. It gets better.
It does. Yes, actually, that's what a wonderful way to circle all of that deep talk around and back to that light of hope that yes, don't forget when you are in those moments of darkness and raw and broken on the floor, you know, at the dark goddess's feet, in her heart is that light of at the end of the tunnel, and it grows and it grows and it grows until you look back and you're like, wow, that's who I used to be. So yeah, thank you for that, because yes, in those desperate moments, I've been there myself. It's quite lonely and desperate and raw, but I think that that's so important that we remind people that it's not permanent, but sometimes that's part of the process to your own becoming.
Yeah.
All right, and Patreon, where can we find you on Patreon one last time?
So it's patreon.com/starry-eyed little lady, or if you just go on starryeyedsupplies.com, you can pretty much find all the links on there.
Perfect. Okay. I just want to make sure that we say it a lot, because I've done it before and I've completely forgotten to say the information. So now I'm like 8 times. Let's make sure we get it out. All right, you guys, look for a second installment and probably a longer, more witchy chat with starry-eyed little lady Joey and I over on the main account in a couple of months. So happy Moon Day, everybody, and have a wonderful, wonderful week. And thank you so much, Joey, sorry, my mouth's not working, Joey, for joining me today. And I look forward to chatting with you again.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.